Welcome back to Feeding the Family with Dr. Kristen. I'm your host, Kristen Saxena. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about nutritional wellness versus diets and which is best for you. I'm joined by our guest, Amanda Yoakum, Hy-Vee dietitian. Well, welcome back to the show, Amanda.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You bet. So Amanda Yoakum, registered dietitian with Hy-Vee, my good friend now that we've been doing all the things together.
Yes.
Well, I am very excited to have you back. And I kind of had this topic that I was really pumped to be able to discuss with you because we were just saying, like, I feel like this is some of the nerdy stuff that I talk about or think about rather, you know, when I'm in the shower, right? I'm like, oh, I have this whole concept, or I think this is. So I've been thinking the way that I sort of phrased it or framed it was sort of this idea of the difference between adopting a approach or a idea that what I really want is nutritional wellness versus a specific diet. And I come at this personally in the sense that, like, I feel like earlier on in my life, I was that person that was very curious and always sort of seeking out and interested in, like, what is the perfect diet? And of course, like, I know, you know, if you see the internet, you know that obviously people are looking for this information and they have different goals. You know, some people are trying to lose weight, and then there's, you know, people trying to get super jacked. And then, you know, you have another thing that I've read a lot or do a lot of research into is also you kind of have this longevity camp as well. And I would say those are like three big ones, at least, that I see a lot. And I'm sure, you know, there's tons more. And I think as a person, and then just sort of as a physician who had an interest in nutrition, I was always curious, you know, about what are these diets and what's the best diet, and like what diet should I do or be on. And I feel like people are looking at that a lot. And I got to thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, Amanda, you're a dietitian. I bet this is like all you hear about. Like you sit at a party and somebody's like, so, you know, what diet should I go on? I'm trying to X, Y, Z. So I started to think, you know, over my life, I've started to like realize, I think that, you know, even in medicine, you realize, and people say this and it becomes cliche, but it's like diets don't work, but they really don't. And I feel like as physicians prescribe diets. You know, the internet prescribes several diets. I'm sure you know several dietitians, and maybe there's a place for that. And I want to talk about that. But I'm starting to feel like, for the most part, like I want to be like, we have to be seeing this, right? It doesn't work. So is instead the key, and it's frustrating because it's a little bit more, again, nebulous, but is the key really, let's get you to a place of what I'm calling nutritional wellness. And we can talk a little bit about what we feel like something like that means, because I guess I'm still defining it. Or, you know, am I wrong? And is there a diet we should all be on? Or, you know, is there a place for that to be your goal, and a place for, but right now you need this diet? So I know that was like a loaded question, but
I love it.
But I guess first of all, maybe like what's your experience? Because I'd have to imagine that you're like, I'm a dietitian, and everybody's like, oh, I have so many questions.
Exactly. I love this topic. And I mean, I'm so passionate about this as well. And that's why I love working with you, because we have such similar philosophies with eating and nutrition. So kind of going back to your original question of, you know, nutritional wellness and versus diet. I get the question all the time. And the question usually comes out to me as, have you read the book? Have you seen, what diet do you follow? I mean, I get that a lot. And as a dietitian, I remind everyone that there is no quick fix. And again, my goal is to create healthy, lifelong eating. It's not a diet. I hate the word diet. And especially when it comes to kids, majority of kids do not need to be put on a diet.
Right.
But diet has different definitions too. A diet can mean, what do we eat?
Right.
And so that's where it gets a little tricky too. Yes. I may say diet, but I don't mean it's a weight loss diet or a specific, internet fad diet. That's not the goal. But so kind of going back to that nutritional wellness. Now, there is no definition for a healthy diet. And that's really tricky. And that's something actually that the government's actually kind of working on is what is a healthy diet? But kind of really assessing your own situation, really looking internally and thinking of your risk factors. Do you have diabetes as a risk factor? Do you have heart disease in your family? When we first start to think about that, then we can start to make modifications with your own diet or your own healthy eating plan, again, however you want to call it. So, making sure that we are thinking big picture again, not thinking the short term. And that's what's tricky. I get clients that come to me and say, well, I need to lose 20 pounds before, in 3 months because I'm going on a cruise.
Yeah.
Well, but do you want to do that to your body? Right. Is that like, maybe we could go work with 10 pounds and then maybe continue to work on that, because what happens, and you know this too well too, someone will starve themselves and then they get to where they want to be for that one occasion, and then the eating habits all come back. They're usually not healthy, and then they gain it all back, and now we're starting over, and now they have less muscle mass because they've lost all the muscle while they're trying to starve themselves. And I mean, it goes on and on. So again, there's so much to this conversation. So that's kind of my first ideas with that is, first of all, looking at yourself, what is best for you.
Yeah. No, I agree. So, I mean, I thought the same thing. And I think that that's the thing that, like, I feel like people know it. Like, if you are like, do you think diets work? And everybody's like, well, no, because we all either have been on diets or know lots of people. And you can see, like, even they lose the weight, they gain the weight, they lose the weight, they gain the weight. And that's just what you see on the outside. I mean, I think that the other thing is on several levels, it's like, well, what is it doing to you on the inside? So what is it doing to you from a physical health perspective? I mean, like you said, losing muscle mass, bad for your bones. Like, there's several things, like with this starvation and then like binging on perhaps non-nutritive foods that are not good for you physically. And then psychologically as well, like, are you like, well, I love myself because I was so skinny for my trip, and then, I gained all my weight back, but I don't care, really. Like, I mean, that's probably not the case. And so, I think we know this, but is it just that we all are like, but that's not going to happen to me? Or I don't know. You know what I mean? I think it's sort of this weird, it's just this sort of like you said, maybe it's just thinking short term, but I have to feel like most of us know, like, this isn't actually going to end well. Right? So true. I mean, there is this diet cycle. There's research to it. And what happens is often a time of diet is when a person restricts, and then they binge, and then they feel guilty, and then they restrict. And it's this awful diet cycle. And so what I like to do is try to break that cycle, trying to have my clients have that healthier relationship with food. That's my number one goal for all my clients, no matter age, situation, is to have that healthy relationship with food. And really, again, thinking about nutrition rather than diet. So looking at it as fuel. And what is fueling yourself the best? Is that, again, but mental health? Is that fueling your mentally, your mental capacity the best? Is that making sure that your blood sugars are at a healthy range? Making sure that we're taking care of our cholesterol and our lipids. I'm a huge advocate for knowing your numbers. And so I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to numbers. I love to look at labs and kind of evaluate and what we could do with the diet. So don't look at just the number on the scale. That I think that's probably one of the worst things that you could tell yourself and saying, well, I'm 150 pounds, therefore I am healthy. Well, is it healthy for you? Let's evaluate it. When have you had a physical recently? When have you had your blood sugars checked? That kind of thing. Yeah. And I I love that point too, because like you said, like a certain weight can be a lot of things. And even when you were at your, cruise weight or whatever, were you healthy? Probably not. I mean, if you got there by like restriction and just like serious caloric deficit or like a very rigid, very, excluding a lot of foods diet, then probably not. Also, like I can't speak for everyone, but were you happy?
Yes.
Were you happy during that time?
Good. So true.
You know what I mean? I think so. That's the other thing is it's like, no, were you like just anxious and stressed and like kind of miserable? Because I don't know about you, but every time I've ever been like that, I'm just like, I'm not happy.
Yes, right.
Was I pleasant to the people around me?
Right.
Probably not.
Yes.
And so I feel like that's exactly right. So like, yes, that is, I mean, and I'm not one of those people too that's like, well, we should just ignore everything, because I think what people think is it's like, well, if we ignore those things, then all we're going to do is eat donuts and ice cream because donuts and ice cream make us happy. But that's the other thing. They don't.
Yeah.
Like, I think that those are the two like polar things. Like if I'm skinny, I'll be happy and I'll stay that way. No. And then if I just if I just do what I feel, what I feel is, whatever, cake and whatever. And so I think that maybe in my mind, I'm like, I feel like that's the mindset. But I recently read book. Jordan Peterson has this 12 rules for life. And one of his rules, I think it's number 2, I might say it a little bit wrong, but it was something like treat yourself like someone that you're responsible for caring for.
Okay, yeah.
And I actually, that made me think of this because I thought, again, like as a parent, but it would be anyone that you're responsible for caring for, even your dog, let's just say.
Right.
Would you suggest that you starve them, for their next vet visit when they're going to get checked? Yeah. Would you suggest that? You know what I mean? Probably not. But if your dog had or your child had diabetes, would you say, let's make some changes to your diet to make this more manageable in a loving, caring way, which doesn't necessarily mean you never get a cookie.
Right.
It just means like, hey, let's think about the way. And you'd be most people, I think would be so much more likely to do that for someone else than they will do for themselves.
So true. Yeah. And having that balance. I think of all of this is having that balance. Also, going back to your original question of, I go to a party and they're like, well, what diet do you follow? I don't follow a diet. It is about balance. And I will tell you, it's work. It's work for some people. And that's okay. And then when you admit to yourself and say, I am worth it to figure out how to eat. I recently worked with a client that she was fantastic to work with because she truly came to me and said, I want to learn how to eat. And she was a 65-year-old woman. And you know what? I thought, good for you to keep trying. And we made it work. And now she knows how to eat. It wasn't, she was on this very structured, rigid eating disorder type of lifestyle for so long that she was tired of it. That whole mental capacity of when you say, you got to your weight that you wanted to, but are you happy? That's not a good way to live. And so having that relationship with food to say, I can have a little bit of candy once in a while, or if it's a birthday, I'm going to have a piece of cake and not beat yourself up about it. We don't want to have the cycle of guilt to go along with food. Breaking that cycle, I call it the food mood connection. We often are raised in a society where we celebrate with food, we mourn with food, we do everything around food. So as we become older, then we always have this connection that a mood should be connected with a food. And that's kind of one of my passions, is to help kids separate that. And so if we have a mood, we're angry, we're frustrated, instead of going and grabbing the potato chips, can we go for a walk? Can we journal? Can we skip over that food and have a connection with that mood that doesn't involve food? I think that's
really interesting. I actually I read a lot of nerdy books. So I read another book that was talking about that I thought was really interesting, was actually talking about how as newborns, actually our first experience of love or connection is feeding. And so I do think too, that's something, again, going back to this, I think a lot of it is just this shame and guilt. And so part of it is even like, I'm a comfort eater, but I suck. And it's like, well, no. I mean, look at this. You're literally like wired this way a little bit. So you shouldn't hate yourself for doing that or feeling that, because a little bit it's like, yeah, like look at you. That was your first experience in the whole world.
Yes.
And you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, and for the most part, that was how you experienced connection with other human beings and feeling
love,
secure
comfort,
and love was being fed. Okay, so that your brain has started to create that association is not like horrible, but you also have to be like, but at this point, how is this serving me right now, right? And so I think that that's the piece too. It's a lot of it, because I think that's people are so judgmental of themselves,
right?
And I think we have this fear that if I stop hating myself, things are just going to go off the rails. Like I have to like be like, that's bad, stop doing that. But you know, it doesn't, in the long term, that just seems to like keep cycling over and over again.
Yeah. And then I work with binge eaters, and you kind of talk about that bad, right? So if you, let's say a person has a binge, well, then they consider it being bad, and then they just continue, and they then now you're going to feel guilty for maybe multiple reasons. Maybe you binged because you had a stressful day at work. Yeah. But then now you still have the stress from work, and now you're stressed because you binged. And so that's not a good feeling for a person. That's not our goal when we talk about food. And again, looking at it in a different way of fuel. I mean, it's completely okay to have birthday cake again with a birthday. I'm not saying you can't do that, but if it's always a connection and then you call yourself bad, that's not a healthy approach.
Totally. Well, and so that's where I've kind of gotten into thinking, like the more that because I feel like obviously I talk about this all the time. I read about it, I write about it, but I'm still a person in the world. And so like, I'm not going to like, there's still all this like influences and messages and like lessons I feel like I've unlearned from a younger version of myself. And some of it I think wasn't very psychologically, emotionally, physically healthy. I think some of it came from a genuine, like I have to think too, somebody that goes in to be a dietitian, you're curious. Like some of it was just like science.
Absolutely.
Like I'm like, well, you know, what's the blue zone diet? Because I want to live forever as this, you know, like thriving person, and I'm going to follow that diet. And so, but the more I really looked into it, or maybe just like with a more mature mindset, is it's like what I kind of realized is, yes, there's like diets that people eat in the blue zones, and there's the Mediterranean diet, and everybody's all over that. But like we went to Italy this summer. If you go to the Mediterranean, people actually, they don't, well, first of all, you're like, all you eat is pizza and pasta. Like this is not the messaging that we're receiving. And the other thing is, it's like what I noticed, I think the real takeaway is they didn't really worry that much about what they ate. I mean, they did, you know, I think that there's like this is healthy and this is good and whatever, but it wasn't like I didn't encounter anybody that was like, I can't, I'm on keto, you know? And you were like, And the other thing, if you see like these, like, you know, they'll interview these centenarians, and, you know, there'll be these little old ladies that have like, you know, she has her 2 Dr. Peppers every day and whatever. You know, I think I saw some lady recently on the news, and I was like, I think that's actually the key, is that no, instead, I just did, you know, I did good for myself. Like I ate what I felt was healthy, but I also just enjoyed stuff. Like I didn't down Dr. Peppers because, you know, I'm in a phase where I hate myself. But I just was like, gosh, Dr. Pepper is delicious. I'm gonna have one of these every afternoon. You know what I mean? Like, and I think, or they're all like, you know, eating bacon every day or something, stuff that doesn't seem, but I think it's more, I realized, I'm like, I think it's a mindset. It's a mindset. It's not a diet per se.
And my, you know, going back to that relationship with food, but then my also key slogan that I have with my clients is that we are looking for consistency. I say this over and over. We're looking for consistency rather than perfection, right? And so when you have that perfection mindset with eating, you you naturally will go to that cycle of thinking bad whenever something like that happens. Or if you have that Dr. Pepper. Again, that's not what we're looking for. Is another way to look at it is maybe my clients need to do an 80-20, meaning 80% of the time they're fueling their body with nutrient-dense foods. Then 20% of the time, it's the Dr. Pepper. It's the birthday cake. And that is still considered a healthy, balanced, nutritious diet,
Right.
or meal plan, however you want to call it. But again, it doesn't have to be 100% healthy food all of the time.
Right. And 80-20 being also something that you didn't necessarily measure.
Yes,
that's the feels.
exactly.
Oh, that's the other thing. You know, people are like, okay, fine, 20% of my calories can be whatever I want. So, you know, I've made my meal plan, and then my 20% I've got planned out real good because I'm going to have a Kit Kat, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think though, but I'm like, no, you're missing the point, I think. And like I said, like, you know, Ellen Satter does have, I think, you know, her version of this is really this idea of this competent eater. And I think it's a lot of these same thoughts or philosophies. But just like for me, it resonated more to kind of be like, I just feel like it's this idea of, for me at least, this nutritional wellness, because it's like asking yourself and being honest, how do I actually feel right now? Do I feel physically good? Do I have energy? Do I feel psychologically and emotionally good? Period. Do I feel that way about myself? And like, I've found that actually, and here's the only caveat I had to that, like from a personal standpoint, is I was like, okay, well, that somebody would be like, well, that's easy for you to say because you know, you're of a healthy weight. You don't have any chronic diseases per se that you're trying, you know what I'm saying? So I get that. So I don't want to be like, all you have to do is see how you feel every day and everything will be okay. Okay. You know, I could see like me being someone else and wanting to like hurt me.
Yes.
But on the flip side, it's like, yeah, but I haven't always felt that way. And so as I get to it, I just feel like this, I mean, it's sustainable. Like you start to feel like, oh, I feel better. Am I like the leanest I've ever been in my life? Like, no, but so what? You know what I mean? Like if it's the healthiest I think I've ever felt from checking all of the categories. Plus the best part is that not only like my gut says, but the data would suggest, but this I actually could do forever.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Instead of all the data that's like, you know, whatever it is, like I think I read somewhere that, you know, only like 5% of people who go on a restrictive diet actually, and to lose weight, keep off the weight like 3 years later. Right. It's like, well, 95% chance that this isn't going to land you where you want to be.
Yeah. And so and that kind of goes back to Ellen Sattler too, is that normalize eating. What is normal eating? She has a whole thing about that. And that is, again, listening to your body, allowing for those occasional treats. And also kind of going back to when you said the 80-20, absolutely. I do not want you to have to mark it all down and figure it out. And that it leads me to the point of food journaling. Okay. So as a dietitian, I will ask my clients to food journal for a variety of reasons. It may be IBS reasons, it may be diabetic blood sugar reasons, but for just a general healthy person, journaling your food every single day for the rest of your life is not healthy. And I've actually had to have some of my clients stop because then they become overly consumed with that 80-20, right? Like, hey, what does that mean? Writing it down. Don't get me wrong. It's very helpful in the beginning to help when I have a client and saying, okay, let's look at this together. If it's all written down and we can analyze it together. But journaling forever is not an approach that we want you to do.
Yeah. So then what are your thoughts on things like that? You know, like the MyFitness. I'm saying all these things because I've done them. Like again, and I did it with the mindset like, oh, this is so good. Like I'm keeping my diet's going to be perfect. And, you know, I'll check all the boxes and my graph will look perfect and all of these things. And I was like, oh crap. Like that was so bad for me. But so what are your, like, I assume like that MyFitness, I don't mean to like hate on MyFitnessPal or whatever, but
it's good.
I think it's a commonly used app. And so do you get a lot of...
So that's the app I actually prefer when I do have clients come in. If they're brand new, I will say, okay, let's start with that. And it's actually, I kind of have a hidden agenda with that. And the reason why is I want a person to, again, adopt the principle that all foods fit into a healthy eating plan. So if that is, okay, I'm going to give them a guideline of I want this much grams of protein, carbs, and fat. Okay, that's kind of where we start usually. and I have them track for a few days. And then we can start to make modifications from there. Are they not getting enough protein maybe at their breakfast meal? We're going to add some in. So those apps are completely helpful.
Yeah.
But when it becomes so rigid and so fixated on those numbers, that's not the approach that we want. So it's, again, having that balance of saying, you know what? Wow, I had a Dr. Pepper in the afternoon and I still hit my goals.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I want. It's just, again, making sure that person sees that I don't need to eat the same things every single day for the rest of my life. Because first of all, that's boring. Food should be fun. Food should not control us. Food should be enjoyable. And so, when you are tracking, it's like, wow, this is kind of nice. I can see that I'm still hitting my goals when I'm having a variety of foods.
Yeah. Well, I do like that because I think on the one end, like you said, I think that doing something like that, not as a lifestyle, but as almost just like a learning experience, it can be really good because you can say the same thing like, oh, I didn't realize that eating X like had so much protein or so much carbs or whatever. So it's that sort of learning piece where you're like, oh, and I have learned about myself that I feel better when I have a good amount of protein and fat in the morning. So, I've learned that these are 5 foods that I like that I could have to have that feeling every day. But on the flip side, the other thing that I would always learn is, I feel like when you do it, you're always trying to get some like protein goal. And I realized, I was like, Jesus, nobody can eat that many chicken breasts. This diet's dumb. Like, you know what I mean? That's like usually the conclusion I would come to, like, gross. If I have to eat, like 5 chicken breasts, I'm done. And then I think that's another like reminder where you're like, this is really not how I'm going to live my life forever and ever and ever. So, so I like that a lot.
And if, back to your protein, sometimes, because that happens with my clients, especially females, we just naturally don't eat maybe as much protein. And maybe that's as simple as saying, okay, we're going to do a protein shake. Done. Yeah. We got a little extra protein from a shake after a workout. It's not going to, it's not going to affect too much the rest of the day. And now you just hit your goal. So again, it's nice to have those tools available for us. It's just, again, we don't want it to be so rigid.
Yeah.
That's the diet that we don't want, right?
Right. And I think that's been the key, is like this difference between, like you said, everyone has a diet because we eat.
Yes.
But like what most people think of it is like prescriptive or like rigid rules. And I think that, again, like as a person has been curious about all these things, it is good to learn. Like I think it's great to learn these are foods that do X, Y, and Z to you, but I also feel like keeping this idea that like, but I can eat whatever I want, and I really can. Like I'm an adult person. I could go out there and I could do whatever I want, right? And I don't have to hate myself for what I'm doing. But then after you get past that, like if I did that, I wouldn't be bad. I don't have to hate me because I'm eating whatever, fried Cheetos and Mountain Dew for breakfast. And I mean, I went through that phase of high school life too. You know what I mean? I've been through all these phases. So, but instead I just feel like once I took to this, like, I'm never gonna cut out anything. Ever. Like, I mean, there'll be stuff I probably don't eat much. And it's because either I don't like it or because I do know like that's not great for me. Right. But on the flip side, like, I'm just gonna actually work on like listening to myself and how I feel. And knowing too that that's very specific to only me and how I am right now, today. And I think that's like you said, is that learning those kind of things can be useful. And like one of my little tricks I have done too is, because again, like to make sure, because I do know it'd be good to have more protein in my diet, so I'll do like protein shakes in my coffee, because even that, like, I find protein shakes often gross. Like they taste weird, and I'm like, I'll do a little, but I can't just do them straight. So you know what I mean? But then it's like, to me, it's like, oh, look at me. I didn't put the whole thing in there, but that's whatever. A few grams of protein, and my coffee tastes like something from It tastes better than something from Starbucks. You know what I mean? For like probably the same price, because the protein shakes are expensive, but still, I mean, it's healthier and it's easy. And so like, to me, it's like those kind of things. It's like add-ons, like little things where I'm like, look, I found something that's good for me that I like thoroughly enjoy. Like, I would be lying if I wasn't like, oh, my little chocolate coffee every morning. And it's like delicious, right? And so it's finding just those things, but knowing like nobody else is going to be able to like tell you, maybe you, but no, but I mean, but for the most part, it's like, you got to figure that stuff out for yourself and be like, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm like satisfied on all levels. And, you know, in the long run, honestly, like that's created a better state of physical health for me than probably any of these other things, because none of those, first of all, they may not have been good for me in the first place. Even if they were on paper, I couldn't keep them up.
Right.
You know? And then I think you get into this also because you can't keep them up, you fall off the wagon. And I think people have this like black and white thinking where it's like, well, you know, I screwed up. I had a piece of bread. So let's just go out for spaghetti and you know, or whatever it is. It's like, well, today's shot. We'll try again tomorrow or whatever.
And one thing too, in that kind of same idea is giving yourself enough time to feel and notice the differences. So my absolute favorite moment is when my client comes back to me, usually about after a couple weeks, and they say, I feel better. And I'm like, yes, because I can't give that to someone. I can't give that internal motivation when they feel better. And that's the same with kids too. I think sometimes our kids, you know, whatever situation, unfortunately, it may be that they don't have access to healthy foods, that they aren't even getting the chance to get to feel that way. And again, that's another one of my passions is letting our kids get to feel good. And same with adults, you know, not beating yourself up about it, but it's a process. It's a journey. And so giving yourself that time, giving yourself that grace to be able to say, wow, I do feel better. This is amazing. And I don't want to have to go back to how I used to feel.
Yeah. Well, I think that I want to just kind of get into like the practical nature of that. But on that note, I think that's exactly right. You got to give yourself a little bit of time and a little bit of trial and error. And I think that's the other thing is that like when you do, you know, like maybe eat more cookies than like, you know, what would normally you'd be like, oh, I'm a horrible person. I ate all the cookies and blah, blah, blah. To be like, oh, I ate a lot of cookies. I don't feel great, honestly. Like,
it's huge.
But
it's
then
huge when you can listen to your body.
You know what I mean? I think that's the other thing. Like, oh, well, you know, instead of just like, oh, well, don't worry, I just won't eat tomorrow and blah, blah. But the crazy thing too is that like, even like knowing that I've even had that mindset in the past, sometimes that's even a red flag for me. When I wake up and I'm like, I'm not hungry, or am I just not trying to eat? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's not even, it can go both ways. And so then when you start to just be like, nope, you know what? I'm not hungry. And when I am, we'll eat. You know what I mean? I think that's the best part. And so, and it sort of gives you this like, oh, like I'm so nice to myself.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like,
that's good.
And you feel nice to yourself and you're like, I made myself this big salad. Not because I want to be skinny, but because I'm nice to myself.
Gosh,
you know
I love that. That's one of my, also my favorites when my clients come back to me and they say, well, you know, we had a busy night of practices, whatever it may be, but they're like, I actually craved the salad or I chose a black bean burger or something like that. And they're like, wow, who am I? You know, it's kind of fun to see them like, I did that voluntarily. I'm like, yes, because you listen to your body. And the day that you say, okay, I need to have the French fries and hamburger. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
All
and
right.
like dig in.
We're not
it up.
Yes.
Like,
we're not beating ourselves up about it.
Yeah.
But then how can we get more nutrition maybe the next day? So again, you have to listen to your body, your mind, your gut. And that's a huge part of this whole wellness journey is, again, not the number on the scale. I know we kind of circled back to that. But again, you have to have that whole body relationship with that food.
Totally. Okay. So then kind of the last direction I want to go with you specifically, because I feel like I said, you're a person that people come to and they probably are often coming to looking for diets.
Yes.
And again, like having been that, like I feel like a younger version of me would have listened to this and been like, oh, you know what I mean? Just give me the diet. Like I can do it.
Yeah.
I want to hear the numbers. I want to hear the stats. And so, but you know, there's a little part of you going, but you know, maybe some of the things you're saying are resonating. Maybe there's some like validity to this. So if you've been a person who's maybe been historically more looking for diets or trying to adhere to more rigid diets, how do you suggest that what are the first steps we take to be like, okay, well, I will maybe give your idea a try. Yes. What do I do now?
Awesome. Okay. I love that question. So I kind of have two different options depending on the personality type. So when I'm assessing that client, I'm listening for cues. I'm listening, do they like structure? Do they like to have that specific amount of food? If that is the case, then I actually do have meal plans. I have meal plans that have recipes to go along with it. I take that guesswork out of it. And to some personality types, that's what they want. To other personality types, though, that may be overwhelming and that's too much for them. So if that's the case, then I go more into a healthy, balanced eating plan. And that goes back to, all right, we are literally going to make sure that at breakfast, you are having a fruit, a protein, and a grain. And we are walking through the entire day, making sure that you are getting the nutrition that your body needs based on how much I, as a dietitian, know that you need to have based on science and research. So again, kind of two different approaches. There are definitely diets out there. And if a person wants to follow a diet for weight loss, that's perfectly fine. I will help them do that. But I'm going to make sure it's a nutritious diet. It's no different if I have someone that comes to me and says, I need a gluten-free diet because they're celiac.
Sure.
Of course, I'm going to help them find gluten-free foods, and we're going to change their lifestyle to follow that gluten-free lifestyle. But it's not going to be something that I make them feel, negative or guilty about because they have to follow this diet. So so I, again, kind of to summarize that, listening to figuring out which personality type would be best. What is that person? What's their goal? I always ask what their goals are with working with a dietitian to make sure I help meet those goals, and then giving realistic expectations, and then or setting realistic expectations for the client, but then also making sure that they have that foundation. Whatever direction they want to go, if they want to go with really structured, then we're going to go that meal plan approach. Not so much structured. That's more nutrition counseling.
And what do you, I guess because I think that's the other thing as you talked about gluten-free and celiac. Because I don't want to leave that out. Definitely there are some more immediate than other reasons why it's well, you do need some specifics to your diet. However, I even think when I feel like I have to, for whatever reason, again, it kind of goes back to the idea where we're not taking care of sometimes ourselves the way, if your kid had celiac, you'd buy every gluten-free thing and there's adults, I think, that are just ugh, I don't want to. And part of that is okay. But I think part of it is why are you doing this to yourself?
Yes.
What you wouldn't do to somebody that you wanted to take care of.
Right.
And so I love that idea, just that approach to be we're going to do this, but we're going to do this because it's the kind thing for you to do for yourself. So I want you to think of it as not ugh, now I have to do this, this, and this, but it's that this would be a great way for you to be really good to yourself.
Yes. And thinking of the stages of change, I use that a lot of times too as a dietitian of where is the person at with adopting any of these ideas? So if I have a person that's maybe not quite ready to make all the changes, that's perfectly fine. What little things can we do to still provide a change, but not be so overwhelming? And I always tell everyone, I don't expect you to clean out everything in your fridge. I don't want you to do that. I hate wasting food. But again, making small changes and having grace with your body and grace with yourself, and making sure that those little changes, we're just going to keep building on those. I am a big believer in follow-up with my clients because, again, I can't change everything overnight, especially with a diabetic. A diabetic, there is a diet that we have to work on. It's not incredibly strict. Most diabetics that can have
I think that's the other thing too, is it's nowadays, most of the time you're on medication. You know what I mean? So
we can work together with everything, right? Their blood sugars, their medication. Again, creating taking that whole approach to what they're eating for the entire meal. Can they cook? Do they need help shopping? Those are kind of some obstacles too that people have, that then they just say, I can't do it. It's like, no, like, let's work. What can I help you with? What kind of shopping can I help you with? Do you need the grocery list? What can I help you with that?
Well, I think that might be, to me, as we mentioned all of this, maybe that's the key takeaway in terms of starting out is, again, like, very few prescriptive diets are like, oh, just change one little thing, right? They're like, this is what you need to do every day, all day. And I think that's not only, like, to me, the essence of what we're talking about is this sort of like just little incremental positive changes. And so, like, I do think about, like, I always use that example of the little third of a protein shake in my coffee. Yeah. It's silly, it's small, but I started the day. It's something that I think is good for me.
Yep.
I enjoy it. And when you start the day on the mindset, like, look at me being good to myself, taking care of myself. Yes. Because the other thing is, I have vitamins that I take, and I used to, and I'm plus minus about vitamins too. I'm not even, but for whatever reason, I would take them, but I would take them very haphazardly, right? Like, and for some reason, I just decided, I'm just gonna get the little pill case and I'm gonna take my vitamins every day. And I just started doing it. And again, I'm not sure I even need any of those vitamins, to be honest. But the act of going, like, look at me taking care of myself and it sets the mindset and the tone where you go, I do stuff that's good for me.
Yep.
And then again, you, instead of seeing like, oh, I had to order the salad and you all got a burger, I went like, I'm so good to myself, or sometimes I get the burger because I'm like, I'm so good to myself and I could feel I really needed a burger. Yeah. But I listened and I checked in and I went, like, did I get the burger because it's the default and I'm like, always eat burgers? Or was it like, I don't even really feel like that and that salad looks great or whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think that's exactly it, is the beauty of this all is like, it's just about like, take yourself where you are, look at what you're doing. So sometimes that's the journals or whatever, and just say like, hey, what's one little change we can make that you might not hate or actually enjoy, and guess what, it'll be good for you. And then we'll all follow up and high five and be like, look at you, girl, you're doing it. And then from there it does become easier to be like, I'm going to make another choice. And then when you realize like, and then I had a burger or whatever, I love burgers. I'm literally not hating on any of this stuff. I'm just using it as an example. You're like, and I didn't feel bad about it because I checked in and that's what I wanted. Yep. And so I was like, worth it, doing it, Yeah. So I love it. That's good. Thanks so much, Amanda. This has been great.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Feeding the Family. Be sure and hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you here next week.